Welcome to the Practice Podcast, a show created by lawyers to help lawyers in life and business without all the complicated lawyer language. Let's welcome Bast Amron founders and your hosts, Jeff Bast and Brett Amron.
Hi, Jeff.
Hello, Brett Amron.
I know I'm in trouble when you use my full name. What did I do this time?
No, you're not in trouble. You're good.
Whew, thank God.
Happy to be here. I have a question for you, as is our practice.
Yeah. You don't even have to say that anymore.
If by... Okay.
All right.
If by magic...
Oh, magic.
You could change
I know this could be real.
Yeah, go ahead. One thing about yourself. What would it be?
Oh,
I mean, that's
I have
a tough
to
one
limit it to
perfect.
one. I have to limit it to one.
Yeah.
It's quite revealing.
You tell us.
I think I'd want to be Jeffrey Bast.
I mean,
if I could change one thing.
That's kind of like using all three wishes on one thing. I mean, that's
what I'd like to come back as. I don't know. I mean, she's...
That's a hard one, right?
That is a tough one because, the easy thing is, I don't know if you know, but I'm a little short. So I'd say maybe have a little more height. My legs would be longer so that I could run faster than I do now. I see these people that are tall that run, they look like gazelles, and I'm here plodding along with my short little legs. But I'm sure there's a deeper answer that I could pull from inside. Maybe that's it. It's hard for me to go real deep and talk about myself.
I think the tendency is when you hear that kind of question is to go right to physical attributes.
Yeah, sure.
Taller,
that's the easy thing.
Hair, whatever. Yeah. I'd like to have this guy's hair.
Yeah, look at that, man. Oof, Gaston's great head of hair.
Yeah,
I don't care about the hair. That doesn't bother me. How I look, that's fine. But how about you?
Well,
You've thought about it because when you ask me the question, you're thinking about an answer. So
oftentimes I don't come up with it. I suffer from tinnitus or tinnitus.
Is it tinnitus?
It is.
Or
I mean, I've been to
tinnitus?
doctors and they all pronounce it tinnitus. Even though
I know,
I
they're
always say
doctors.
tinnitus.
I feel like they do that so
I'd love
other
to get,
people struggle.
I would love to get rid of that. Like you, I would be a little taller, a little faster, whatever, something like that.
Right.
Love to know how to play guitar.
Yeah,
something
that'd
like
be good. Pick languages up a little faster than I do, things like that. Yeah. I'm sure there's a deeper thing in there somewhere that you and I are just not getting to. Maybe our guest will help us get
deeper. Why don't we introduce him so we can hear his answer? Our guest today is Peter Prieto. Peter is a partner at Podhurst Orseck with more than 25 years of experience handling complex commercial litigation, class actions, multidistrict litigation, and white-collar criminal defense. He's a former federal prosecutor. He's tried over 30 cases and argued numerous appeals before the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. Keep looking at him to verify the accuracy. Peter serves as chair lead counsel in the Takata Airbags product liability litigation, which is the largest product defect multidistrict litigation in U.S. history. And he holds key roles in several other MDLs, including the GM Igniter switch, Blue Cross Blue Shield antitrust, bank overdraft cases. He's represented both plaintiffs and defendants in matters involving securities fraud, antitrust, healthcare, professional malpractice. He's done it all. Internal investigations. He's also a fellow of the American College of Trial Lawyers and the International Academy of Trial Lawyers, and he's been recognized by Chambers, Best Lawyers, Florida Super Lawyer. He's done it all. Peter, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
We are happy to have you here.
Good to be here.
Do you have an answer to the question? Is there something you change? I mean, it's hard.
So the first two things that came to my mind is that Brett is a lucky guy because it took him forever to say something that he wanted,
right?
That he doesn't already have, right?
I think we're all lucky sitting in this room.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that I sing the same thing because I'm a relatively short guy myself.
Right. You want to be
I'm thinking, okay, if I had anything... Love my family. I wouldn't change my family. I wouldn't change my career. I say, you know what? 2 or 3 more inches?
Yeah.
Why not?
I'm with you.
You know?
It's like I feel blessed. We're so fortunate, even having that conversation. But if it was something that I couldn't use for some greater good, some wish, then I'd take a couple inches.
What was about you?
Taller.
You said, what can you change about you?
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
So
right.
You didn't talk about the most recent award that Mr. Prieto.
Oh, yeah, please. It was not.
Why is it not?
You know me. I'm like Ron Burgundy.
So,
I read what they put in front of me.
Well, yeah. Honestly, I don't remember what specifically it was called.
Okay. You brought it up.
No, I know I did. And that was horrible. It was terrible.
You weren't there.
No, I was out of town. I wanted to be there. And we had 2 tickets. We were a sponsor and we wanted to support you because it was an amazing event. I heard I missed an incredible speech by you. I heard Steven Rosenthal was amazing as MC. I heard the whole thing and I was very upset that I wasn't there. So I apologize for not being there, but congratulations to you. Can you tell our listeners specifically so I don't mess it up?
It's an award that's given by the American Jewish Committee every year to a lawyer. And it's named after a learned hand, the famous judge that if you went to law school, you would have read or heard about learned hand. So it's a learned hand award. Every year, the American Jewish Committee gives out sort of 2 awards, one to a lawyer named after a learned hand. And they also give out a humanitarian award to a business person. It's given to someone who's, at least the learned hand award is, somebody who's practiced law for a while, relatively well known in the community, and has done things outside the law.
I looked it up. It says, with extensive experience working in both the public and private sectors, Prieto is recognized for his impact on the legal industry and the South Florida community. So, well-deserved recognition. I'm glad you brought it up, Brett.
Yeah. I mean, it's super impressive, and obviously your whole career, and we'll get into all this and some stories that you have, which I think our listeners can really be interested in. But the fact that it is a Jewish organization bestowing an award on somebody who is not
Correct.
Jewish.
Wait, you're not Jewish? What the heck? What are you talking about? No, I agree. It really was.
I'm going to let you work your way out of this.
Well-deserved recognition.
It was a nice evening. My whole family was there. We had a blast, and I had a lot of friends there. I had my family there. Mm-hmm. It was really a nice evening.
It was a who's who of the South Florida business and legal community. I mean, everyone was there. I've never seen a room full of so many legends.
And honestly, I'm not saying that to be nice. Like, I really did hear that your speech was one of the best ever given. I kid you not. I swear I heard that. I really heard it from me. Was it recorded?
It is recorded. I'll send it to you.
I would love to see that.
Maybe we can link to it. Let's see if
we can link to it in the show notes. That would be fantastic.
Look, without giving you the details, I'll send you the sort of like my major 2, and I worked on it a lot because I've known about this award for a while now that I was going to get it. Mm-hmm. To 2 major themes that I think, first was gratitude. I'm grateful. I've been very lucky in my life. And I think if you talk to people that have been relatively successful, including you guys, gratitude is like the most important thing that you can think of. If you've been successful and you're not grateful, there's something wrong with you. I'm not saying just successful in your professional life, but in your personal life. Mm-hmm. If you're not grateful, there's something missing with you. And the other theme of my remarks were, we're all Jews. And I got that quote from a non-Jewish, non-commissioned officer at the end of World War II. He was the highest ranking non-commissioned officer in, not a concentration camp, but it was a POW camp. Mm-hmm. And he was told the prior day by the German officer, he said, basically, line up all the Jewish officers first thing in the morning in front of the barracks. That night, this non-Jewish master sergeant told all his soldiers, prisoners of war, saying, we're not going to let only the Jewish soldiers line up. All of us are lining up. All 1,275 of us are going to line up in the morning. And they all lined up. The German commandant said, these can't be all Jews. And that's when he made a famous reply, we're all Jews. Right. And he refused. He refused to identify the Jewish soldiers. The German commandant put a gun to his head and said, identify them. And he said, no. And if you shoot me, it was the end of the war almost, you're going to be tried for war crimes. And the guy surprisingly just backed off. Wow. And so he saved about 200 Jewish POWs.
Amazing story. I've never heard that story.
It is. It is. Yeah. As you guys know, there is this Yad Vashem. Mm-hmm. It's called the Righteous Among the Nations. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And every year, I believe, they identify a non-Jewish person who helped Jews during the Holocaust. Mm. And it's really, they truly vet people for this. Wow. And it's got to be somebody who did it, not because he was going to get paid or for any he did it just because he wanted to help a Jewish person. Oh. And some of them paid with their lives.
Amazing.
So that was the second theme. It was like basically, we're all together. We're all in the same, like some historian, as I was preparing for the speech, I was reading about Jews during the Holocaust and people who were non-Jews who helped Jews. And one historian basically said, those who helped Jews did it as like on a spur of the moment. They didn't really think, should we do it? Should we not do it?
Humanity.
And they basically said, they didn't look at people as Jews. They basically said, look, these are people, human beings, no matter who they are, they deserve our help. They made that decision to sort of like help Jewish people, even though they themselves were not Jewish.
And I think that's what most people would do in the event of a tragedy. I mean, you're 100%. Not, if you saw someone fall into a river, you're not going to say, what political affiliation are you before I pull you out?
What religion are you? What political affiliation are you? Or American? Are you not?
Right. You're
it's
a human instinct to help somebody else, normally.
Yes. Despite what everyone's being told by leadership and the media and everybody else, we all are in this together. We all live 100%. On the same planet and we should all get along. That's great. I really appreciate you mentioning that. And I'm curious about the gratitude theme. Do you have any kind of formal gratitude practice? Do you have a journal or something? Or is just gratitude just a part of your life? How do you embody gratitude, or how do you practice gratitude?
That's a good question. I meditate a little bit. I don't do it consistently. I go through phases where I meditate, which is not easy. People who meditate, I always tell people, when people tell me I can't meditate, I don't have the patience, I say that's exactly why you should meditate. That's exactly why.
Because they haven't meditated.
Yeah, and meditating is hard because your mind is constantly working, and meditation is about not trying to think of anything, just thinking of your breath, and it's really difficult.
It's practiced attention.
Exactly, it is. I practice it by sort of realizing it every day, almost how lucky I am, that I am who I am, that I live in this wonderful country, that I have a wonderful family, that I have great friends, that I've made a good living with my profession. So
we're so fortunate. Right?
Wake up and I walk around my neighborhood, I'm thinking, beautiful neighborhood surrounded by trees, and I'm thinking there are people getting bombed in Israel and Iran. And there's so much craziness going on around the world. And here I am in this beautiful neighborhood, walking around. Nobody's shooting at me.
Right. You woke up, you're on a comfortable bed, air conditioning. You weren't worried about where your next meal was going to come. You weren't worried about safety. I mean, all these things that we just take for granted.
You're not walking around looking over your shoulder, listening for planes or
you popped an AirPod in instead of being worried about
It's crazy.
It's
just nuts.
All right, we could spend a lot of time on just these topics. So tell us your origin story. Where are you from? Where'd you grow up? Before even law school?
Sure.
Are you one of those kids that always knew you wanted to be a lawyer?
So I'm Cuban originally.
You were born in Cuba?
Born in Cuba, born in a small little country town. I left there when I was 7. And about 22 years ago.
So you're 27 now? No,
I'm 27. My mom kept telling me, my mom's parents stayed there. Her parents and her sister stayed in Cuba. And my dad and her and I came over. And about 20 years ago, my kids were like little. They were 5, 4, and 1. And my mom kept saying, I really wish that my parents are able to see their great grandkids. And it was really rough because, 5, 4, and 1, if something happens to them there, they get sick or whatever. The good thing is that my cousin was an anesthesiologist and her husband was a surgeon in Cuba at the time. They were still there. They're here now. So we decided to go, and we stayed with them in a small little country town that I remember driving into the town and realizing that I was born in like the middle of nowhere in this little country town of like maybe 1,000 people, maybe. And my wife, who is not Cuban, I think her grandmother was Cuban, but she came to Key West in like the early 1920s. So she was like, oh my God, you were born here? This is where you were born? And my son, who was 5 years old at the time, I'll never forget this. We get picked up at the airport in a little van. And my son, who was 5 at the time, we get in, we drive an hour to this little town where I was born. And he's looking around, and then we park right in front of my grandparents' apartment. They lived on the 2nd floor. And my son leans over to me. He was sitting next to me. He leans over and he says, Daddy, why is everything so messed up here? Because he was noticing that no paint, everything was sort of like broken down. Nothing was really well done. Those were his first words in Cuba. Why is everything so messed up down here?
Really.
So born there, came here when I was 7.
Do you remember much like from your childhood?
I remember parts of it. Not a lot, but I remember parts of it. So we came here, had a small apartment in Southwest, and then we moved, I think, 3 times in Hialeah.
When you came here at 7, was that your first time outside of Cuba?
Oh, of course.
Yeah. First time on by airplane or?
First time on an airplane.
You landed in the U.S., so you've grown up in this.
Yeah, and I remember being picked up by friends of ours who were living here, and it was the first time that I had ever chewed gum. I remember giving me, and you remember those old yellow little box? They were called chiclets.
Of course.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
Well, it's like, wow.
What is this?
That's a luxury.
Wow.
Oh, my gosh. The little things that we take for granted.
Grew up in Hialeah, and my parents still live in the house, or my mom still lived. My dad passed away a couple of years ago. My mom still lives in the house that they bought in 1971.
Wow. Amazing.
So she's still there. So I grew up in Hialeah. Went to high school at a Catholic school, Champagnat Catholic High School. Had a couple of campuses, one in Hialeah, one in Northwest Miami. Alex Pinellas, the former Dade mayor, and I went there together. So I met Alex. Both graduated from there. I went to St. Thomas University.
First one to go to college?
First one to finish high school. My mom went up to the 8th grade. She went to like a school that was run by nuns. And she said the nuns were, it's true, nuns were really mean. Some of those nuns were really mean. And then my dad, I think he got up to like the 6th grade. And my dad was born like in the country. I mean, I have photos of my dad on a horse. So he was really born in like the middle of nowhere, I think the western part of Cuba. So, but my dad, as I said in my remarks at the agency Learned at Hand event, was very intellectually curious. I mean, he read, and I'll never forget after work, he would take me to the library. He would go to read the Spanish language books and check them out. And I would go to like the history and biography because that's my thing. And so he was always very intellectually curious, read the newspaper every day, read books all the time. So I got that from him.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So then you went out to university. At what point did you think to yourself, maybe I'm going to be a lawyer, I want to go to law school, and what led you to that decision?
Good question. When you're kind of like a Cuban kid who wants to aspire to do more than just, my dad was a mechanic and I'm always very proud of him. But him and my mom especially said, listen, you got to get an education. I mean, they stress that all the time, got to get an education. And my mom would say, people can take a lot of things away from you, but they can't take an education on what you think and your ability to think. So she always said that constantly.
Smart woman.
That was one. And two, I grew up watching Perry Mason, seriously, you watch and, what a lawyer does in a courtroom. Yeah. I could always argue well. I mean, I remember when I was in 6th grade, my 6th grade elementary teacher told me, I need you to run an errand. And we was like me and 2 other guys. And we ran this errand and we just went on a detour and frolic for like an hour, 2 hours. We come back and she starts giving us grief because, where were you? And I just came up with this cockamamie story. And I'll never forget this. One of the kids goes, hey, man, because she bought it. And one of the kids later said, goes, you should be a lawyer.
So there it was.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I hated the sciences. So I like to read. I like to analyze. That's how I ended up being a lawyer. No lawyers in my family. When you're growing up, especially as a Cuban kid, there's like 2 professions, medicine, being a doctor, or being a lawyer.
Sounds like the Jews.
Didn't want to be a doctor.
Be a doctor or a lawyer.
Didn't want to be a doctor. Right. I said, you know what? I'm going to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
So you go to law school, out of law school, right to Holland and Knight?
I was a summer law clerk at Holland and Knight. The second year. First year, I clerked for state court judge pro bono. Half the summer, I clerked for the state court judge.
Right.
Guy was Phil Knight.
Oh.
He's passed away. Great judge. Looked like Santa Claus. Smart as a whip. I think had worked at Fowler White for many, many years after law school. After my first year, I worked with Judge Knight, and then half the summer with the U.S. Attorney's Office as part of a college work-study program.
Oh, okay, cool.
Which led me eventually to end up with a job there. And then second summer, I clerked for H&K for Holland and Knight. I got an offer from them, and I started my career at Holland and Knight.
So you worked for Holland and Knight before going to the U.S. Attorney's Office?
Yes.
Like as an attorney?
Yes.
So how long?
Almost 2 years.
And was this, you already had the U.S. Attorney gig lined up? Or
no,
tell us
I did
how
not. Yeah, it's a funny story. I loved working at H&K. I worked with George Mencio, who's still there, who was a trip. He was like a big brother to me, worked hard, but I really wanted to get into the courtroom. I wanted to try cases.
Yeah, Mencio's a corporate transactional.
Yeah, he does a little bit of everything. He's pretty savvy. It's very few lawyers who can sort of like bridge those 2 fields of transactional litigation, and he did. So I worked with George and Michael Moore, who was like the head of the department back then. And then I left. I applied to the U.S. Attorney's Office. And when I applied as a lawyer to the U.S. Attorney's Office, the lady who had been my supervisor when I was a summer law clerk there was like the number 2 or 3 person in the office. She had been promoted over the 2 or 3 years. I had worked with her a lot, and she was ecstatic. She called me as soon as she got my resume. She called me, goes, "Can you come in for an interview tomorrow?" I'm like, wow, I can't do that. So I went in there like a week or 2 later for an interview with the U.S. Attorney's Office. I interviewed with like 10 or 12 people in the office, and I got a job offer like the next day.
So what made you do this in the first place? If you were happy at Holland and Knight? And
trial experience.
Did you always know you wanted to do this?
No.
Or?
When I went to law school, everybody wants to go to like a large law firm and make money. That's the only thing that I really knew. I had no idea that I was going to be a prosecutor. But during my clerkship, I saw the work that they did. They were always in court. It was all federal court. It was really substantive. And they would just give you just a tremendous amount of work. And I wanted to try a case. I wanted to be in the courtroom. And it panned out because I worked 1 year in the civil division at the U.S. Attorney's Office. And I walked in, they showed me my office, and they said, "Those are your cases. Go to them."
When you say those
are your files.
Yeah,
a bunch of files. Boxes or box
a bunch of files. Let's.
There you go.
There you go. When you're a young lawyer, and obviously you got some training, but you did things on your own. So no, you had no senior partner to tell you, no, you shouldn't do that. So you were forced to make decisions as a 26-year-old lawyer, you're forced to make decisions on your own about what discovery to take, what depositions to take. I tried like in the civil division, because I went to the civil division because I had no spots in the criminal division. I tried, I think in a year and a half, I tried like 8 or 9 cases, mostly forfeiture cases, and some to a jury, some non-juries. But in a year and a half, I'm a 26-year-old lawyer. I'm trying like 8 or 9 cases.
Amazing.
You know?
One of the keys you mentioned is that you're forced to make decisions. Of course. Perhaps more importantly is that you were forced to make mistakes.
Absolutely.
Like you made mistakes
100%.
rather than having a safety net there, which most of us as lawyers grow up with someone else to fix our mistakes before we make them.
Right.
And I think you probably learned so much more that way, right?
I did. I had a hearing in front of Judge Spellman, who was a character. You know, nowadays, federal judges are very kind of more restrained. You don't really have judges who are kind of characters. Judge Spellman was a character. Just a side story, he was Irish. At the U.S. Attorney's Office, when you were in the criminal division, you would always get assigned to a judge at the initial entry level of major crimes or smaller cases, and you would always get assigned to a judge so you would know what the judge likes and dislikes. And all the prosecutors that were assigned to Judge Spellman were Irish. So it was O'Sullivan, it was O'Neill.
Prieto.
Right. So they assigned somebody to Judge Spellman. It wasn't me, somebody else to Judge Spellman. His last name was DeRosa. And he goes, in my courtroom, you're Rose. Rose. But anyways, you learn from mistakes. I was on direct examination. I was examining my own witness. He was an agent. I'll never forget this. His last name was Talent, which is kind of a misnomer. But anyway, I'm asking him questions, and asking him a question, he gives me a terrible answer. And this is not in front of a jury, it's in front of a Judge Spellman, but it's a bench trial. And he had bifocals, and he wouldn't really look at the witness. He would kind of like be looking sideways. And I asked a question, I got a terrible answer, and all I heard was Judge Spellman say, "Peter, never ask a question you don't know the answer to." So you do learn from your mistakes as a young lawyer.
I love that. What a great way to tell you, too.
Yeah,
it's a bench trial. I mean, there's no jury, so he can help you along the way.
He was awesome.
Yeah.
He was a great judge.
Those are great experiences. I mean, I don't think you realize it in the moment. When you're there, 8 or 9 cases in your first year, you're getting assigned to Judge Spellman in division. My guess is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you didn't really realize the extent of the experience and what you had until you left.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I tell people, and this happens all the time, I see a lawyer before they go to the U.S. Attorney's Office and after, even if it's 3 or 4 or 5 years after the U.S. Attorney's Office. Not only are they a better lawyer, but they're so much more confident. I mean, I was there 7 or 8 years, but like the first 7 years, I tried close to 20 cases, argued 12 appeals before the 11th Circuit. So the experience that I got in 6, 7, 8 years, it would have taken someone 30 years or a lifetime to get in the private sector.
Sure.
It was amazing. I mean, I wrote my own briefs. I did my own writing for virtually everything. My whole career at the U.S. Attorney's Office, I did my own writing. At the trial court level, I worked my butt off. But I went in there saying, if I came here for experience, I'm going to get my experience. Yeah. So like, for example, they would ask me, when you would try a case, there would always be an appeal. You convict someone, they appeal. And the appellate division would always say, give us a brief, we'll do the brief. And I said, nope, I'll do the brief. So I did my own briefs, but it gave me the opportunity to argue about 12 cases before the 11th Circuit.
Amazing.
So there's little stories like that, like talk about mistakes. And this wasn't really a mistake. I was up in the 11th Circuit. I was like, I must have been like 29, 30. I'm arguing 2 appeals in front of the 11th Circuit, back to back, one day and then the other one the next day. I was arguing a sentencing issue because, they have the sentencing guidelines, and sometimes they are changed. They get revised during the case, for example, right? So the issue was, do you apply the sentencing guideline at the time of the offense or at the time of sentencing? And I don't remember the specifics, but, if you apply, for example, the guideline at the time of sentencing, and it's harsher, it could be like an ex post facto law where you're retroactively really punishing somebody. I don't know how it happened, but I'm arguing this. And, when you go up there, it's not just your opinion. You have to have like the U.S. Attorney's Office opinion plus the Department of Justice's opinion. So the panel was Hatchett, who was the first African-American judge on the 11th Circuit, and it was Judge Frank Johnson, who was a legend. Frank Johnson was one of these old-time Southern judges who was basically against segregation. So he and 4 or 5 judges took on the Southern establishment because they were like upheld the civil rights laws. He was like a legend, Frank Johnson.
Yeah. Wow.
There's actually a biography of him called Taming the Storm that is amazing. So I'm doing this argument, and I think it's Johnson who asked me a question. I don't know if I said, look, Your Honor, I think you have to apply the guideline at the time of sentencing unless it's harsher than the prior guideline. And he must have misunderstood me because he said, that's the most disingenuous thing I've ever heard the government say. And I'm like, whoa. I'm like, this guy's a legend, Frank Johnson. And thank God that Judge Hatchett kind of bailed me out because I think he understood that Judge Johnson had not heard me correctly. And then he bailed me out and asked me a friendly question so that I could answer it. So he bailed me out. But I'll never forget that. He goes, I'm thinking, this guy who's a legend just called me disingenuous, you know?
Those are the things that you remember.
Right.
What could you have done differently? Right. Not that you were disingenuous or just what could you do differently?
Yeah. I learned tremendous. I mean, I even tell young lawyers, even if they work for me and they want to go to the attorney's office, I say, go. Go for 3 or 4 years. You'll never regret it. People say, well, the law is a profession or your career is like 40, 50 years. You got plenty of time to do different things, especially when you're young. So I tell them, I said, go.
And it's so intense, you know, over such a short, finite period of time, if you make it that way.
Yes.
That the experience is incredible.
Yeah. What's the typical path? So if somebody's, right now, a kid isn't listening to this, they're in law school or considering law school, and they want to go to the U.S. Attorney's Office.
They have to apply.
You applied after you were already practicing. Is that common?
Yes, it is common. In fact, it's kind of like, it's a little bit of a catch-22 because unless you're a superstar and you are a federal clerk, you're a superstar. I mean, Roy Altman, for example, he went to the attorney's office straight from his clerkship. Clerked for Judge Marcus and went straight. But right now they didn't back then. Now they require some trial experience, which is tough because unless you go to a large law firm,
it's hard to get.
You want to go to the U.S. Attorney's Office to get trial experience, but you're not getting it there, and the U.S. Attorney's Office is requiring trial experience. It's my understanding. I mean, that's not always the case. So I think you can go, make some money, 2 or 3 years, 4 years at a private sector, and then go to the U.S. Attorney's Office. I mean, it is like, to me, the best experience. If you want to do litigation, you can get.
You were there, you said 8 years?
8 years, and then I spent a year with Dan Pearson as part of an independent counsel investigation.
I want to come to the Dan Pearson thing, but the 8 years, is that a typical tenure? Right, you're a former prosecutor, but in the state it's a little bit less time, or curious what the time frames are, people.
It depends. I mean, I think for the state is different because it's not at the level of federal, the U.S. Attorney's Office, and if you stay past a certain period of time, it's like you've kind of marinated too long. You kind of overstayed, and maybe the same thing for the U.S. Attorney as well. And then you're like, okay, well, now you haven't dealt with clients. You don't know really kind of how to practice. You just know how to try cases, which is great, and appear in court. But I feel like there's that magic number. There's a time frame. Yeah.
I think I stayed probably longer than most. I mean, I just love the job. I love being an assistant U.S. attorney. It's the greatest job. You'd leave the courtroom after a verdict, and then a juror would drive by and honk his horn at you. You're like, you walk in there and you say, I'm Peter Prieto and I represent the United States of America. It's a great,
cool.
You wear
it's pretty cool.
Amazing. Why don't people stay? Why isn't it a career?
A lot of people do.
A lot of people do.
A lot of people do. A lot of people do. I'll tell you what, I left. So I was there for 7 or 8 years. And then I got offered to work with Dan Pearson in Washington investigating Ron Brown.
All right, let's dig into that.
Let's dig into that one.
Yeah.
No, I was going to say, who's Dan Pearson and who is Ron Brown? Because I don't know that a lot of the listeners will know.
So Dan Pearson was a former 3rd DCA judge. Before that, he had been an assistant U.S. attorney back in the 60s. He then went and opened up his own shop, did a lot of white-collar work, criminal defense work, really, really sharp, Amherst undergrad, Yale Law. After he became an assistant U.S. attorney in the 60s, he was partners with Bob Josefsberg, because at the time they were married to sisters. And after a long time in private practice, he went on the 3rd DCA, was really the guy on the 3rd DCA for about a decade, then stepped off the bench, joined Holland & Knight, and in 1995, he gets appointed to be the independent counsel investigating Ron Brown. Ron Brown was the former head of the Democratic National Committee, who Bill Clinton appointed to be the Secretary of Commerce in 1992, whenever I think it was Bill Clinton came into office in 92.
92, yeah.
So he appointed Ron Brown to be the Secretary of Commerce. And Brown was a very charismatic guy, bright, charismatic. Back when they had independent counsels, there was a statute that specifically authorized the independent counsel. So the Department of Justice, if there was an allegation about somebody in the cabinet or the president, didn't want the Department of Justice, which was under the direction of the president, to investigate. They think it'd be a conflict.
Seems like a logical rule, by the way.
Correct.
Just saying.
Correct. But the statute, as it was written, had a very quick trigger. So if there was an allegation, somebody said he did this, and somebody else said, no, they did not, almost like there was an issue of fact, that would trigger the appointment of an independent counsel. That appointment was made by 3 judges. There was a 3-judge panel who made those appointments back then. And Dan was appointed by one of those judges. And I think it was because Peter Fay was one of the 3 judges on that panel.
11th Circuit,
and Peter Fay knew Dan. And this is a really funny story, how small the world is. Dan was competing with his former partner, Bob Josephsberg, for the appointment. And Bob tells a very funny story. They both interview for the job to become the independent counsel with these 3 judges, Peter Fay and 2 others. And Bob, he's watching a newscast and it says, an independent counsel has been appointed to investigate Ron Brown. He is from Miami. He is a graduate of Yale Law School.
He's running down the list.
He's a former assistant U.S. attorney, and his name is Dan Pearson.
Oh, no.
Bob thought it was him because Bob is a graduate of Yale.
Yeah, all of that. Right.
He's a former assistant U.S. attorney, and he's a Yale Law graduate. And then Dan Pearson is announced.
That's funny. Wait, so why were they investigating Ron Brown?
Ron Brown was being investigated at the time because he had been paid $500,000 by his former business associate, a lady by the name of Nalanda Hill. And basically, the allegation was never really proven because he was killed in a plane crash. He was given the $500,000 as a quid pro quo for something. That was the allegation. So we get appointed to investigate that allegation, and we were up there for about a year before Ron Brown's plane. He used to do these trade missions. He would take business people all around the world to do trade missions and sort of sign up contracts between businesses in one country and businesses in the U.S. So he would take business people all around the world to do these trade missions. He was flying into Bosnia, terrible weather, old Air Force plane, and it was a really treacherous airport because it was in between mountains, and they flew right into a mountain. So he was killed. A lot of his staff were killed. Business people that he was traveling with were killed, and that was the end of our investigation.
So Dan Pearson gets appointed as special counsel. How do you get involved in that? Because you're an AUSA at this time?
I'm an AUSA at this time. This is like 1995. I'm an AUSA. I was very close friends. I'm still friends with Bill Pearson, Dan's son, at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and I got to know Dan through Bill.
Okay.
And Dan always had a group for breakfast at the Brickell Emporium that would sit in the back of the restaurant, and it was Dan Pearson, Tom Scott, Barry Garber, Bob Scola,
all the judges.
And they would sit back there. And then my wife and I, had a coincidence, we would go there for breakfast almost every morning because I lived in Miami Lakes. She was living with me. We would drive into downtown, we'd have breakfast, and we would go to work. And I had met Dan a few times before he gets appointed, had lunch with him and Bill. The day after he gets appointed, I'm having breakfast with my wife, and the Herald has an article saying Dan Pearson appointed independent counsel for Ron Brown. And Dan's in the back, having his group breakfast with his buddies. And after he's done, he comes to us, he always did, and he sat with us. And I said, congratulations, I saw you got appointed to be independent counsel. And we were just chatting and all that. And then as we're walking out, he goes, would you like to join me? Would you like to go to Washington and work with me?
Wow.
And I said, no, not really. I have a great job down here. I really love it. And then he says to me, who would you recommend? And I recommended John O'Sullivan, who was the chief of the criminal division at the time, had done the courtroom investigation. And then as we're walking out, my wife goes, what are you, crazy? You said no? Because her parents also lived in Northern Virginia. We would have to go work in D.C. So 2 or 3 days later, I told John, I had this conversation with Dan Pearson. Dan Pearson calls John, offers him to be the deputy independent counsel. John's like, he was the best man at my wedding. He's my daughter's godfather. He goes, you got to come with me. Come on, let's go. We got to go. So we went up there.
Oh, what a great experience.
And we had a blast.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they gave us this is like a great gig. First of all, it was fascinating, high profile, but they gave you what is called a per diem to live up there. Yeah. The salary, this was like 1995, the salary was like about $110,000.
Which back then,
it was a lot of money for a government lawyer.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Plus, they gave you $3,500 a month for rent.
Wow.
And back in those days,
like
rent.
$1,100 for food, like a per diem for food and stuff like that. My wife and I, we didn't have any kids at the time, we had just gotten married. We lived in a 3-level townhome in Arlington with an elevator and colonial furniture. It was beautiful. It was gorgeous. John, who had 2 little girls at the time, he lived in a house right on the Maryland, D.C. border on the Maryland side, where you had like major law firm partners living up there.
Yeah.
I mean, it was gorgeous.
That's cool.
You know?
Amazing.
So that's how we ended up there. And there's a lot of complaints about independent counsels spending a lot of money. But the fact is that when you walked into that, it was separate from the Department of Justice. You had to be independent. We had to pay rent. We had to find FBI agents and prosecutors. We had to buy computers. We met with Louis Freeh, me, John, and Dan.
Head of the FBI at the time. Yeah.
FBI agents into our office. And we actually recommended 2 or 3 that we had worked with in Miami. We said, we want these guys. Can you give them to us? And he did. We recruited lawyers. Robin Rosenbaum, who sits on the 11th Circuit. Yeah. She was the youngest lawyer on our...
Wasn't she also at H&K?
She was also at H&K. Went to H&K after, I believe. Right. She was recommended, I think, by the dean of the law school at Miami, and Dan talked to her, and so she came on board. So we built a staff of agents, and we had a great time.
So the cost, you're saying, it's not money wasted.
No, you had to build...
Even though you had an elevator. Other than your elevator. That might have been excessive.
A 3-level colonial with an elevator.
Besides the elevator, everything else was... That's amazing. Yeah. So when that investigation ends...
Right.
Is the idea you're on loan from the U.S. Attorney's Office?
Correct. You're on detail.
You're on detail.
I could have gone back to the U.S. Attorney's Office, and I would have had a job there.
That was the original plan. And then... Correct. But what happened? That didn't happen.
Didn't happen. I mean, I could have gone back. And so Dan basically said, look, you've been an assistant U.S. attorney now for like 8 or 9 years. You tried a bunch of cases. You've gotten an amazing amount of experience. Now come back, make some money, and sort of like deal with clients and advise clients and have that as part of your career. You know, he convinced me to go back.
Really, your wife convinced you, right?
That was part of it.
Another time.
That was, by the way, that's another story. So I went back to H&K. I went back in 96, and then I loved what I did. I mean, I was doing like white collar stuff, commercial litigation, and I was there for 14 years before I went to Podhurst.
Amazing.
And I sort of like, I became the hiring partner in 99. Eventually I became the head of the Miami office a couple of years later. And then 5 years later, I was like the head of all litigation for the entire firm.
I think you've left one distinction off. You kicked me out of the Miami office. You're the one that came into my office and said, you guys are leaving, aren't you? Or something like that.
I think that is true. Yeah. That is true. Because you and Craig we're planning on leaving Holland & Knight.
Yeah.
And you went to Hunt & Williams, right?
You're the one that came into my office.
Well, I was
closed the door behind you, and you're like, I know you're leaving. And I said, oh, man.
I was the executive partner for the office. I mean, these guys are leaving out. We said, look, guys, you can't have your foot in one firm and your foot in the other.
It is what it is.
It's very uncomfortable and awkward in here right now. I'm just saying. Sounds like you did deserve it.
I feel like we've only scratched the surface with Peter. We've just got to where he is.
Can we ask like a wrap-up question for now? Because maybe
we're going to bring it back. We have to bring it back because we could do 2 episodes.
Given your experience, where you see things today in the practice and whatever, like what are some of the key top 3, 5 tips that you would give a young lawyer today besides go work, get experience, go get trial experience, but young people that are considering the practice of law, going to law school, or that are already in law school, right? You know, because things have changed, right? The practice coming out now is different, and the whole market.
I think number one is to add value. Figure out how you're going to add value. For a young lawyer, it really is probably your experience, my experience. Adding value is essentially being a good writer, being really strong analytically. That's how you add value. I think taking ownership of your cases, not basically sitting in your office and having the partner tell you what to do, but looking at a case and saying, this is my case, what would I do if this were my case and I had nobody to like help me and give me their recommendations, just like I did when I walked into the attorney's office. I think those would be 2. 3, just to learn from every case, because listen, sometimes you establish a career based on one case because you learn something about one case or one subject matter and you take off. To me, those are like the three most important things.
I like it. Seizing every opportunity.
At the beginning, don't chase the money. Just
Can I tell you one real funny story about my wife?
I love funny stories.
I was at Holland and I was like 2001, 2002. Marcos Jimenez steps down as the U.S. attorney. And I get approached about succeeding Marcos as the U.S. attorney. Mm-hmm. And Marcos probably doesn't remember me, but I have lunch with him and somebody else I won't mention, but I have lunch with somebody else. And Marcos at the Capitol Grill, and I said, we want you to apply for the attorney's office. And I said, look, guys, I can't. I have 3 kids, or young, whatever. I really like Holland and Knight. I was the executive partner at the firm. Mm-hmm. So I come back home and I tell my wife, I said, listen, I've been approached about becoming the next U.S. attorney. And she's like, why would you do that? This and that. I go into the closet and I start taking my clothes off, change. Just got home. Back in the day, you wear a suit. And my daughter first comes in. She was like maybe 5 or 6, my daughter. And she says, Dad, Mom says you're going to leave your job and get another job that pays less. Are you crazy? And then 5 minutes later, my son, who was like a year older, like 6 or 7, comes in and says, Dad, Mom says we're going to be poor. Is that right? Is that true? We're going to be poor.
You are married to a very smart woman, very strategic.
And it wasn't because of that. I mean, it was partly because of that. But being a U.S. attorney, you gain a great reputation, but you also lose 2 or 3 years of your practice, which you have to sort of like reestablish once you leave the U.S. attorney's office.
Yeah.
So
it's kind of like becoming a managing partner of a firm where you have to kind of give up everything 100%. And then you have to start over.
And it's really hard. That's why I think once you become a managing partner, especially in a large law firm, your next step is either out the door or just hang around.
Mediation.
Well,
or arbitration.
I mean, it's really tough.
Yeah.
Amazing.
It's really tough.
Amazing story. I feel like we only scratched the surface.
We didn't even get into all the class action work and the MDL, like all that stuff.
Yeah, everything. Amazing. Peter, we definitely want to have you back.
I'd love to.
In fact, before you leave, we're not going to do it on the record here. We'll go off the record and then we'll schedule a follow-up because this was a lot of fun and I feel like we only scratched the surface. Maybe we should bring Peter and Bob Josephsberg in together at some point.
We've had Bob on. The stories are just incredible.
Amazing. If you enjoyed this episode, please let us know by leaving a 5-star review and subscribe to the show and share it with your friends and family. And we'll see you next time, Peter. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Peter.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
For more information on this show and other resources, visit fastamron.com and connect with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram @FastAmron.